following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back, in case you're wondering, with George Case. David Hubler is here. I'm here, Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I'm going to introduce the man himself, George Case. Let's have a little hot stove league.
Well, Ralph, thank you very much. David and I were talking off the air a little bit, and if we're going to discuss, another hot stove league conversation, because we're in the winter time, and certainly hot stove league conversation is very, very much a part of our lives. And you're not going to be playing much baseball. I know here in the Northeast it's cold and wet and rainy, and we're probably getting all the rain that California needs, but we're getting so much of it. And, David, you're probably getting it down in D.C., too.
Yeah, it seems to be clearing a bit, but it's so wet.
Yeah, I know. My front yard looks like a swamp. If it had been a baseball field, they'd have called it for wet grounds, I can tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, if you're out playing golf today, you can't expect to get any bounce out of that ball.
No. You might have to go find your ball. It look like in the middle of a lake somewhere.
Right, exactly, yeah. Every hole is a water hole.
There you go. That's true. Yeah, well, we're going to be talking a little bit about, third baseman in baseball, and, David and I and Ralph, we've got probably our opinions about third baseman, but it's a good hot stove topic to really discuss, because third base has always been a key, infield position, and there's been some great third basemen over the years, and, I personally know of many that my dad played against. He had tremendous respect for, and when you see the skill level of a third baseman, if you really know baseball, you have to understand how much ground they can cover, but they have to have a great arm. They have to be able to have tremendous cat-like reflexes, because they're very close to the hitter. And, there's also the opportunity, if there is a bunt or some kind of a topped ball, that third baseman has to be able to move extremely quick, pick up the ball underhanded, and make the throw to first. It's an amazing play to watch for those guys who really have that ability. Some third basemen don't have that ability. They're pretty much, going to be stuck as far as the back playing in the deep third or making that throw or whatever. But to be able to come in on a ball and field it and throw at the same motion is a great skill. So, David, you have some ideas, or Ralph, of some of the third basemen over the years that you'd like?
Well, I want to tell you. Go ahead, Ralph.
I was just going to say, let's honor first some of the really great fielding third basemen that are playing today. The A's have one who comes in for a bunt faster than anyone I've ever seen. He's Matt Chapman, and if you guys want a thrill, go to YouTube and catch some of his highlights. He is absolutely cat-like. He's terrific, and it goes to the increased skill of today's athlete, especially defensively. Third base is a position where instincts are everything, and first step quickness means so much. I don't think that's changed so much over the years, and so I just wanted to recognize Matt Chapman. There are others. There's Arenado with Colorado, who went to the same high school as Matt Chapman. Coincidentally, he was a few years ahead of him. But they're great, and I just wanted to take a moment before we review the third baseman men of our time to recognize the greats in today's game.
Well, Ralph, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I am not that up to speed on the current crop of third basemen. So I'm glad you mentioned those guys. I mean, my knowledge is basically based on history. So the current crop, and I agree with you, I've said it before, I think that the today's ball players are much more highly skilled. They don't have the same fundamental grasp of the game that the older players did, I don't think. But on the other hand, they have tremendous skills, and so I really appreciate your comments about those two third basemen today.
Okay. David, let's start with your impression of third base. I know the first third baseman you rooted for was Dr. Bobby Brown.
That's true. That's very true. As I think I've mentioned once before, he was doing his interning or some medical training at Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx, which was practically across the street from where I grew up. And I had a summer job there at one point, and I always hoped to see him. But he was long gone by the time I got that summer job. But I didn't realize that at the time.
Didn't your mom work at that hospital?
Yes, that's right. She did. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
But I got to tell you a story about third baseman because his name might not come up, and that's George Brett of the Kansas City Royals. It was an opening day in Baltimore, and I had the opportunity to go out on the field along with the rest of the press corps, and we were on the sidelines while Kansas City was taking infield practice, and I sort of stood in the coach's box, the third base coach's box, while one of the coaches, I don't remember who it was hitting fungos down to third base to George Brett. And I must tell you, those balls were coming out like out of a cannon. Now this is just infield practice. But those balls were coming at him. I mean, and he was just plucking them up like he was picking flowers out of a flower bed. I mean, the ease with which he fielded those balls and threw them across the diamond was just amazing to me. I mean, I know it's a tough position, and as you said, Ralph, it requires, the instincts of a cat and the reflexes of a cat. But I had never seen it that close up. And I was just amazed. I mean, it takes a superhuman effort to play that position well. And I know it was just infield practice, but it sure impressed the hell out of me.
Well, that's a good recollection.
Well, David does, and the fact is, you're talking about George Brett. I mean, George Brett is certainly one of the top, third basemen, and I think during those years, and Brett, compared, he was playing when you got probably the two greatest, and that was Schmidt, the Phillies, and
sure.
Brooks Robinson.
And Brooks Robinson, right?
And Brett might be overlooked. Based upon the fielding ability of both of those two guys, but Brett was a sensational hitter as well. And of course,
that's right.
His claim to fame was the pine tar incident. So if you've seen clips of that when he went absolutely ballistic when Billy Martin went to the umpires and said that the pine tar on the bat that Brett was using was exceeding major league standards, and they took a home run away from him. And
I think it was too high up on the barrel.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Whatever it was, but Brett, he had a home run taken away from him. He charged out of the dugout, and I thought he was
ballistic. He was.
Oh yes. Well, he had used that bat in previous at-bats, and it was only after he homered that Billy Martin went out to challenge him on it. I think that was part of the reason Brett got so excited.
Yeah, you're probably right, David. Absolutely right. If he had grounded out or flied out or whatever, it probably wouldn't have been any problem. But
right, exactly. Yeah. Now, Billy Martin knew all the tricks.
Was saving it for that home run.
Absolutely. He knew all the tricks of the game. The other one I would like to mention, a contemporary, because I see him play fairly often, is Anthony Rendon of the Nationals. They are talking of Rendon as the team replacement if Harper leaves. because if you look at his stats, they're great, and he's a tremendous third baseman. He doesn't get the recognition that perhaps he should, but his overall stats are exceedingly good. And the Nats, as I said, are talking him up as the third baseman and sort of team representative going forward over the next several years.
Well, let me then pay a little homage to a current New York Met retiree, just retired, Mr. Wright. David. His career paralleled, as I see it, Don Mattingly in many ways.
Yeah,
both,
sadly.
They're both on their way to the Hall of Fame, and their careers were just cut short by back injuries, and that was horrible. Wright was the best third baseman that the Mets ever had, and he came back and rehab for years trying to get in shape to play ball again, and he actually got to play a few games down the stretch, and nice way to retire from that standpoint. So I pay homage to him. Someone joined us.
Ron, how you doing?
Ron, how are you, sir?
Good.
And it's
Sorry,
a good time, Ronnie. We're talking about third basemen, and I want to ask you all, because Ronnie was a Dodger fan, and you guys are a little bit older than me, so my recollection of Billy Cox is really just from reading. Was he as good defensively as anybody that ever played the game? I'll start with you, Ronnie, because you're the Dodger fan and you're new to join us. Ronnie Rabinovich.
He was a very good third baseman defensively. He wasn't much with hitting, but he was a great, great defensive ball player. Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Ronnie, good to hear you. I think probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think he was probably overshadowed by the other great players on that infield. Pee Wee and Jackie and Gil. And you say, well, who was the third baseman? Well, you say, Billy Cox. Well, I don't think he comes in the conversation because everybody always talks about, the greatness of Pee Wee, Jackie, and Hodges. But I agree.
Right.
Cox was an outstanding third baseman.
And then Junior Gilliam came in too. So.
Right.
Yeah, when they moved things over.
He was no slouch. Yeah.
Hello, gentlemen.
Pardon me?
Hello, gentlemen. I'm a little late. I apologize.
That was Alan. Alan's getting in here. We're going to have a little conversation about third baseman, Alan. And
okay, fine.
We were just talking to Ronnie. We were talking to Ronnie about Billy Cox, but since you're on there, you can certainly put your 2 cents in about Don Hoke.
Well, he was good for a couple of years. In fact, Casey Stengel once he was asked by Brooks Robinson if he was the best third baseman that Casey ever saw. And he says, "You're second." He says, "Who's first?" He says, "Number 3 in Brooklyn."
Billy Cox.
Yeah.
Billy Cox. Yeah.
Yeah. May I just mention Hank Thompson, the third baseman of my boyhood here team?
He was terrific.
He was a hitter. He was
a hitter too.
He was a terrific ball player with demons. He was one of those guys who just had the bottle with him all the time, and his life was really cut short because of it. Actually, his post-baseball career had him robbing a liquor store, going to jail.
Really?
Yeah. So, But before you and Al got here, we were talking about early Yankee third baseman, and I want to elaborate a little bit. David was talking about Bobby Brown, a man of achievement. Can you imagine being a major league ball player and going to med school kind of in your part-time, becomes a doctor, becomes a heart surgeon, later became president of the American League, if I remember.
Yes.
And
Yes, he was. Yes. Yep.
Peter Golenbach, he's still with us. He's in his 90s. Peter
Yes,
Golenbach,
he is. Yep.
And I don't know, Alan, were you in on that interview we did with...
No, but there was an article during the season in the Daily News that Bobby Brown and Eddie Robinson, who is now 90, will be 98 next month, they get together once a month.
Yes, they both live in Texas.
Marbles, yeah.
Yeah, they live in Texas. I saw them. They actually showed up at the Old Timers Day game about 2 summers ago when I was up there.
Yeah.
And they look pretty spry for a 90-year-old man.
Right.
Yeah, Wally Westlake just turned 98 in November. Yeah. Wow. He's older by a month and a half of Eddie Robinson. Also, one of the things I wanted to mention is that for years, in fact, when I was young, Pi Traynor was considered the greatest third baseman of all time. And then came Eddie Matthews. And after Eddie Matthews came, the triumvirate of Schmidt, Brett, and Wade Boggs.
Right. Schmidt seems to be taking over in people's
Yeah, he's
minds.
considered the best of all time, according to a number of measurements, yeah.
Offensively and defensively.
Defensively, right.
He was very good defensively and probably underrated. Guy has a great stick, like Schmidt, 500-plus home runs. Defense comes up last in people's minds.
But he was a good defensive third baseman. He really was. Yeah.
Here I'm going to ask you guys. You all lived through this era of Brooks Robinson and Clete Boyer defensively. Just defensively. I know Robinson had a little more punch in his bat, but do you guys think that Clete Boyer was as good as Brooks Robinson defensively? Start with you, Al.
Okay, no, I was in Cincinnati for the first 2 games in the 1970 World Series. Where Brooks Robinson just essentially beat the Reds by himself.
Yeah, he was good.
And that was an incredible performance by a third baseman. Another one who I think was equal to Boyer defensively was Greg Nettles, who was a much better offensive ball player than Clete Boyer.
Right. I wasn't in New York at that time, and
that's the game Game 3 in 1978 World Series when Nettles made several brilliant plays to help Ron Guidry beat the Dodgers.
Okay.
Those damn
now let's talk about Ken Boyer, Ron Santo, and Eddie Matthews, all starting third basemen in the 50s and 60s with in the National League, and all Hall of Famers except for Kenny Boyer. I wish Gene Hutmaker were here this morning. I thought of this topic late. He was Gene is a Ken Boyer aficionado. I'm going to throw this at you guys. If Ron Santo is in the Hall of Fame, should not Kenny Boyer be in the Hall of Fame?
Yes. I say yes.
Ronnie Rabinovich says yes. Al, what do you say?
Probably. His biggest problem was that he passed away at age 51 from cancer. So he didn't have any campaigns like the endless campaign to put Santo in.
Right, and he was in the public eye more as a broadcaster and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he suffered some horrible problems, the effects of diabetes.
Yes, he lost his legs. Yeah.
Did he lose a leg? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And also, you guys, when you mentioned Sano, I know it was a long campaign, but I think he finally was inducted after he passed away, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, I've always felt that's a bad thing. I mean, it's tough on the families, tough on the players if they're still alive, and yet they don't get inducted. I mean, we've talked before about Gil Hodges, the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a tremendous honor, and to be inducted while you're still alive is terrific for the player. But to do it after his death, I think it certainly doesn't speak highly of the Hall of Fame when they go through all these gyrations and bring in a lot of people who some people say, well, they don't even be deserving of it, and yet ones who everybody feels are deserving of it, they finally get the honor or not. In the case of Hodges, get it, and they're long gone.
Yeah.
They ought to think about doing what the Hollywood people have done with the Oscars and create a category for, there's a category among the Oscars for lifetime achievement. Yeah. And it's to sort of make up for people who have not won an Oscar per se, but they have contributed so much to the industry that they are honored in their own right. And perhaps if the baseball writers who vote had that opportunity to vote for someone whose lifetime achievement, and Gil Hodges certainly could qualify for that award, and that might be the way, unfortunately, that he would get in, posthumously.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting concept, David. I'm certainly familiar with that Lifetime Achievement Award. I hadn't thought about it in terms of baseball, but that's an interesting idea.
It is an interesting idea, yeah.
I think that's a great idea, actually.
Yeah.
Because why leave guys out over the object or subjectivity of X number of people who saw them, may not have liked them, may have a grudge for a lot of ways, and they've changed the voting so much over the years. They really should start all over again with some of these guys, and
yes, they should. Absolutely.
Start the entire process. The guys that are no longer with us that should be in, guys like Veda Pinson and Gil, of course.
Minoso.
Really
Minoso, yeah.
Minoso, yeah.
He recently passed.
Well, Hal Bach, our colleague, has a column about that. I think that's a discussion on Tuesday's show about people. And I was really blown away that DiMaggio did not get in on the first ballot. He had to wait another year. I mean, that's insane.
And how about the ones that don't get unanimous consideration? Right. Like Mays didn't get a unanimous.
No.
Nobody did.
Nobody has done it, right.
These Yankee fans are going to be bent out of shape because
we're always bent out of shape.
Mariano Rivera doesn't get in unanimously. And I answered a thread on Facebook, which I normally don't do on this kind of thing. I said nobody gets in unanimously.
That's right. Right.
Well,
Willie Mays didn't get in unanimously.
No, neither did Harry Aaron, neither did Ted Williams, neither did Musial, neither did Ted Williams.
Yeah.
Neither did Frank Robinson, neither did Seaver or Carlton or any of Spahn, any of them. Yeah.
I know. It's just impossible to believe that some of these.
Yeah. Even Ruth and Cobb in the first election with Wagner, Ruth, Cobb, Johnson, and Matheson, none of them got in unanimously. It goes all the way back.
Yep.
But Jackie Robinson only got 77%, so he just got in.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Right.
You wonder you wonder how these guys are worse being paid as sports writers.
Yeah.
Feel that way. And now, of course, it's become such a tradition that there are sports writers who feel that it's up to them to uphold that tradition and won't vote for a Willie Mays or a DiMaggio on the first ballot.
Yeah, that's crazy, David. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's where you get into the political thing too. I mean, that's, to me, is absurd. You know, it's to honor the person. I mean, it doesn't matter some sports writer, you know, whether good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
I mean,
who cares what they think? It's honoring the greats. It's just they're going to make a statement based on what they think, and not give a guy like Mays unanimous considerations.
Well, no, I'm with you on that.
Didn't Whitey Ford have to wait a number of years before?
Yeah, he got in as third time. He got in with Mantle.
Right.
Oh, right. And even Yogi did not get in.
No one has. I mean,
no one.
That's a great
trivia question. Who I loved, was not in the class with the people we just mentioned. Got in the first ballot because there was nobody that they thought was better than him. It was an open field.
Right.
But Willie, as much as I love Willie Starks, and I loved him a lot for what he contributed to the Pirates and baseball, I'm not stupid enough to put him in a class with Musial, Williams, Mantle, Mays, Henry Aaron, any of those types.
No, but he is a
Hall of Famer, but first ballot, that's another story.
Yeah.
Right. But,
we should be picking it.
Then there's the argument, does a guy get any better on the second ballot than he was on the first ballot? There's something to think about on that.
A lot of it depends on who's up on the ballot with him.
Absolutely.
That's a key ingredient in the whole thing.
Let me ask you guys something about that. There's also been exceptions to the Hall of Fame, and I don't know who makes that exception, but they honored Lou Gehrig and they honored Roberto Clemente. Now, if they make an exception for those two, outstanding, but who makes that call? Who makes the exception to the rule?
You mean the 5-year waiting period?
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to, the 5-year waiting period?
Yeah, that's what I am referring to. There has been a 5-year look back, and in the case of Gehrig, because of his death from ALS, and Clemente because of the plane crash, they made an special exception for those two guys.
Yeah, people wanted to make a special exception for Thurman Munson, and he's never been, he's never even been considered, basically.
Yeah, well, you're right about that, Alan. You're absolutely right. I forgot about Munson, but yeah, you're right. I mean, he was a great catcher, and obviously died prematurely in the plane crash. But he has not had that exception made, and I don't know again who calls that and who makes that exception. But there have been in the past.
But they also made the exceptions a couple of times for players who didn't have the 10 years, and the two of them I can think of just off the top of my head were Addie Joss and Ross Youngs, both of whom died prematurely from diseases.
Mm-hmm. Can we get to Al Rosen?
Oh, yeah. I just bring him up.
Of my youth.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, basically, it was pre-Sandy Koufax when I was really young, and post-Hank Greenberg. And there weren't very many Jewish stars to root for. So naturally, we took to Al Rosen like flies take to waste material. Now, I want you guys to analyze him so I can have a more objective memory.
All right, let me take that one, Ralph. He got a little bit of a late start because he was behind Ken Kelter when he came up to the Indians. So he really didn't become a regular there until 1950 when he was already 26. And he had that superb year in 1953 when he came in with 1 point and a batting average of winning the Triple Crown. He led in home runs and RBIs. And he got his hand injured in the 1954 All-Star game to the point where he couldn't properly grip a bat anymore. And also he had back problems which forced his premature retirement after 1956. But the years of 55 and 56, he was really a shell of his former self. The hand injuries and the old that he received in the 54 All-Star game really ruined his whole ability to hit.
Okay. Now, I'm ignorant. Is he a Hall of Famer?
No, he's not in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he'll ever get in there because his peak years were too short.
Okay.
He didn't have the glamour of a Sandy Koufax or a Dizzy Dean.
I might have told you this story. I was so in awe of this guy. I was the Topps representative covering minor league ball in the 80s when Al Rosen was general manager of the Giants. And he was down scouting one of the teams I was covering. I think it was in the Northwest League. And he had nothing to do all day. He was just sitting around most of the day, and neither did I, just waiting for things to happen. And I did not have the guts. I made 11 attempts to walk over and talk to him. I did not have the guts to introduce myself. I was so in awe of the man. And I'm not shy by any means, but I remember that day, and now that he's gone,
you won't get a chance.
I kicked myself. We passed each other crossing Market Street once, and I knew who he was, and I looked at him, I go, and he kind of smiled like he saw the recognition, and I didn't even react there. I just never got the chance to talk to him. But any Jew, any minority in the early 50s, you're a pioneer.
He's also the best ball player born who had a birthday of February 29th. right ahead of Pepper Barton.
Right. So
Alan, that's a terrific that's a terrific trivia.
I saw that. I looked. I did a thing on search on reference for all the players that were born on February 29th. There weren't too many of them.
Right.
The thing about, I wanted to mention, Alan, you talked about two people that I've got a direct connection to with regard to Al Rosen. Mickey Vernon beat out Al Rosen by 1 percentage point for the batting title, which deprived Rosen of the Triple Crown in '53. And then there's a book written by Rich Westcott, who we had on a few months ago, about Mickey Vernon, the gentleman first baseman.
Yeah, I have that.
Title of the book.
Yeah.
And Al Rosen wrote the foreword to the book. And also, you mentioned Kenny Keltner. Kenny Keltner, my dad were teammates with the Indians in '46. And, Keltner was there, and then Rosen followed in his stead. So those two guys, I agree with you. They were terrific third basemen. The one thing that Keltner did, which many people may not realize, is that he stopped Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak in '41 with two sensational plays at third base.
Right.
So, he gets credit. A lot of people don't remember the name Kenny Keltner, but he was an outstanding third baseman for Cleveland. And, he did, play with my dad. They were teammates. And matter of fact, the photo that we have on our website is my dad sliding around Kenny Keltner at third base in 1938. And then later in '46, they were teammates. So, I knew of both Keltner and Rosen quite well because of my connection to Mickey Vernon and my dad in baseball.
I think Keltner, the Milwaukee Sabre chapter is named after him.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was not aware of that, Alan. Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah. I know Sabre chapters are named after quite a few former players, so I was not aware of that one, though.
Yeah, ours here is Casey Stengel because he was, had association with the Dodgers, Giants, Yankees, and Mets. Dodgers and Giants, of course, when they were still here.
Right.
Right. And you guys briefly talked about one of Al's favorite, Don Hoke. Don Hoke was also a Brooklyn Dodger early on.
Yeah, he went to the Cubs.
Yes, he was.
He was on third base when they won the World Series. He played third base when they won, because there's a picture of him and Campanella and running to hug Padres after they got the last out. And he went to the Cubs, and they went to the Cubs for the Reds, and he went to the Reds for the Pirates. And the deal where they got Harvey Haddix and Smokey Burgess for Frank Thomas and a few other players who were not all like great.
Yeah,
and that trade basically made the Pirates, helped the Pirates win the pennant in 1960.
It's too bad your memory's fading.
Yeah,
Al.
yeah.
Hope too, by the way, to come.
You are amazing, Al.
Hope died of a heart attack at the age 41, chasing a thief who had stolen relative's car. I also think he was very disappointed because I think he expected to get the Pirates managerial job in 1970 when they brought Murtaugh back.
Right. Right. That's right, Alan. I wanted to ask you one other thing while we're talking about Pirates third baseman. You mentioned him as one of the all-time greats, and he is. That's Pie Traynor. And my curiosity to you is, where did his name Pie come from?
I guess he liked pies. I'm not that sure.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm asking you, because that's the
Yeah.
story that I heard. I don't know whether it's true or not, but that's where I heard the name, because, when you think about first names, I mean, you don't think about...
There's really Harold.
Somebody named Pie.
There's Harold.
He is. Pie
he was originally from the New England area, because he was still doing a radio show when I was out there in the early 60s, and he spoke with this fairly thick New England accent.
In that case, my name should be Gil.
Yeah.
Hey, good time to talk about old timers days in New York and Yankee Stadium. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was at summer camp all those years when the old timers got together. Fortunately, because I love summer camp, and I would not have missed Kittatinny Camp's experience for all the tea in China, but I did get to miss all those All-Star games. David, George, your life was an All-Star game.
I went to a lot of them. And in fact, the early ones I remember, Mrs. Babe Ruth and Mrs. Lou Gehrig used to sit together, and they would be announced, and they would stand up and wave to everybody, and they did that for a good number of years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, no, they did, and the old timers games. I went to quite a few, but the one that I recall directly, my dad was invited, and it was at Shea Stadium, because Yankee Stadium was under renovation, I believe, or something happened.
Yes,
anyhow,
it was. Yes.
The 25th anniversary of the 39 All-Star team. My dad was invited because he played, and he was selected to that game, and he and DiMaggio were sitting on the bus together, going from the hotel out to Shea Stadium. And we still have some nice mementos. They gave all the players a brass ice bucket, and they gave them a tie clip and a couple other mementos with Shea Stadium on them and old timers games. So that was my dad was thrilled to go back and saw a lot of his former friends and players from the 39 team. Again, that was the 25th anniversary, and they had it at Shea Stadium.
Hey, because your dad got to know DiMaggio, and obviously passed on stories to you about their interaction.
Right.
Can you, George, tell us something about DiMaggio that isn't public knowledge, the way he was or the way he carried himself?
Well, I think, Ralph, a lot of people, Joe was very standoffish, and, he always wanted to be introduced last at the old-timers game as the greatest living ball player and all that kind of thing. The one thing I think maybe a lot of people don't know about Joe is that he really had a son, Joe DiMaggio Jr., who went to prep school nearby where I live in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, never played baseball because he didn't want to be compared to his dad, and he had the same name. They became estranged, and it was not a happy childhood or a happy parenthood for DiMaggio. So that's something that people, know about his, great skill, and, of course, with Marilyn Monroe and all that stuff. But, he was not highly thought of as a parent.
Yeah,
and many people, talk about that because, the fact is that his son, who carried his name, wound up being, matter of fact, he passed away not too long ago. He was living off the street he was in San Francisco or someplace on the West Coast. And Joe and his son never really got along, and that's a sad thing when you look at
very sad.
Sons. And
I think he was kept out of the will. It's left out of the will too,
right?
If I recall correctly.
You're right, David. Yes,
Joe
it
had
was
a little bit of a mean streak in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, Mantle's 4 sons did not do well.
Two of them are dead.
Yeah, 2 of them are dead. That's right.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They just. Well, there was not an estrangement, but the fact that Mantle was gone so much of the time and didn't have too much.
And alcohol was a real common denominator.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Oh,
It wasn't even shied upon. It was considered part of the game almost. After the game, go out to the nearest bar.
Well,
I was talking basically about Mickey's family. Even his former wife was an alcoholic. From what?
His two sons that passed away passed from Hodgkin's.
Yeah, that's what
Mantle
thought he was going to do.
Yeah,
right.
And, that's what Mantle, said.
He thought he was going to taking
care of himself. He knew he was going to live as long as he did.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Sad about that family. I remember a Sport magazine color picture of Joe DiMaggio in his prime, probably in the late 40s, with his young son by his side.
Right.
And it was such a beautiful picture that life didn't turn out that way, makes the memory of the picture even sadder.
Ralph, I remember seeing that photograph, and it bothered me because I knew the ultimate outcome was not good. And whether it was posed for the cameraman, I have no idea. But all I know, I feel very fortunate because I grew up the same name as my dad. My dad was a very loving father and gave me a solid foundation. So I felt badly for DiMaggio's boy because it was a hard thing for him to. People, as soon as they would introduce Joe DiMaggio, oh, you're Joe's son, and same name. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you.
On the other hand, Dom DiMaggio's was an absolute wonderful human being, a wonderful father, a wonderful businessman, a humble person. So it's hard to imagine. In one sense, they grew up under the same household, the same parental influence, and DiMaggio and Dom turns out so totally different. But let me throw in a good father and son story for a second. And David Hubler, you have some nachas going. Your son just received an award in
thank you.
Most like yourself, would you talk
we won it's a second Emmy. He and his team at WPEC Channel 12 in in West Palm, Florida, won the regional Emmy Award for their coverage of the shooting at the high school down there last year, Parkland. I forget the name of the Parkland.
Right.
And they won it last night at the regional awards dinner. So he's 2 for 3. 2 for 3. He's got 3 nominations. Yeah, thank you very much.
That's a .667 batting average.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I said. Doing very well. But I have a quick story, and I'm telling this because it just talks about fathers and sons. I was in California the first time I was out there for the Booksellers Conference, and I was introduced to a guy, and he said, "Hi, I'm Roy Campanella Jr." And I said, "Yeah, and I'm Gil Hodges Jr." I didn't believe him, but he was. And he gave me this strange look, like he's ready to kill me. I mean, he did not look at all like I remember Roy Campanella looking. And so, I thought the guy was just kidding around. It was true. It was Roy Campanella's son.
Wow.
Yeah. It was just a spur of the moment, and that's just what came into my mind, Yeah.
Well, I think David, that's very interesting. I think Ronnie, you're on there. Wasn't Jackie Robinson's son didn't he have a Jackie Jr.?
Yes, he did. Yeah. He had a very tragic end.
Right.
Yeah, he was another tragic. Right.
Jackie had 2 sons, David and Jackie.
David and Jackie.
Right.
Would you talk
Jackie
about Jackie? Jackie Jr., everybody assumes that he was still using drugs.
No, he wasn't. No.
He wasn't. He was.
I'll tell you the story.
Tell the story.
He played baseball, and some of the adults would say, "Oh, you're okay, kid, but you're sure not as great as your dad." I mean, having that same name, and he wasn't a great athlete. He ended up going to the war in Vietnam, and he came back a heroin addict. And his father was on Governor Rockefeller's commission against firearms and drugs, and here his own son was arrested with a packet of heroin and a firearm. And Jackie said, "I don't know how I could have been an influence to any other kids when I wasn't an influence to my own." And Jackie Jr. went into a treatment program, and after he got out of that program, he became a counselor at that center. And there were these glowing letters from all these addicts that said, "I owe my life to Jackie. If it wasn't for him, I'd be dead today." And one night he was coming home at night, and he was killed in a one-car accident. I don't know if he fell asleep or what happened, but there was no drugs or no alcohol in the system. And to have a son, to lose him to drugs, to regain him, and then lose him permanently was too much. Jackie Jr. died in 1971, and his dad the following year, 72.
I think that broke his heart. I think
it broke his heart. And they were estranged for a little while, too, because of what he was doing with drugs and different things, But, yeah.
Now talk about David. Very few people know about him.
David.
He's a coffee entrepreneur.
Yes, he is. He lives in Tanzania, Africa. And he started a coffee farm there. And he got jobs for all these people growing coffee. He's in Africa about 9 months a year. His family is there. He comes back to the States about three months a year. And it's called Sweet Unity Farms. It's a big coffee farm. Matter of fact, I met him in Minneapolis when he was here talking to the Radisson Hotels, who gave him a contract.
Wow.
He was a great guy. And then Sharon, his daughter, is the vice president of education at MLB. And she goes around, she writes a lot of children's books. So each one in their own right is giving back to their countries and their worlds.
Is Rachel now a member of the Hall of Fame?
Yes, she is.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
I think it was a special award like an achievement award. Like
she just turned 96.
Yeah, God bless her. Yeah, 96.
Still hanging in there.
Still hanging in there.
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up a former baseball player with Yale, who, whether you like him or not, he was the president of the United States, and he was a multifaceted guy. He was the captain of Yale and was there.
The Yale baseball team, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he was a first baseman, I believe.
First baseman.
Yes, he was.
Left-handed first baseman. And the story I heard, and Ralph, you mentioned about George H.W. Bush, was the fact that he had his former first baseman's glove in his desk at the White House.
Okay.
He loved baseball.
Yeah, I read that today. In fact, you probably didn't see it because Tom Boswell in the Washington Post, the two of them became quite friendly. And at one time, Bush invited Tom Boswell to the White House to meet him. And that's when Boswell said, I've heard you still have your first baseman's glove. Where is it? And Boswell wrote today, he opened the desk drawer and he pulled out the glove. It was right there in the White House.
Right there.
In the Oval Office.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting, David. I had heard that. I didn't read that. I had heard that before, but he also, I've seen the pictures, and I'm sure you guys have, of George Bush and Babe Ruth at Yale in 1948, just a couple months before Babe passed away. And that was a very interesting photograph, because there you see, the all-time legendary Babe Ruth with a former president of the United States there with the connection to baseball at Yale University.
His son, George W., who actually was a part owner of the Texas Rangers for a while, he was a baseball fan too, but not to the extent that his dad was. His father was a real baseball fan.
He used to show up with a lot of the Astros games.
Yeah, I was covering an event when he was VP at his office, where they brought in a bunch of little leaguers from Asia to meet him as vice president, and he was thrilled to meet these kids and talk baseball. I believe what's his name, St. Louis Cardinal catcher who was an announcer for
McCarver.
Tim McCarver.
Yeah, McCarver was there too, and it was he was just having a great afternoon talking baseball with these kids. So yeah, he was a true baseball fan.
He really was.
His kid owned the Texas Rangers for a while.
Right.
He was a pretty good baseball fan himself.
Yeah, I said he was, but he wasn't.
But not to the extent.
Not to the extent, right? Not to the extent.
He wasn't the extent. I don't think he was the player. I don't know whether he played, but George, H.W. Bush was really a very good player.
I read in one of the obits that H.W. was the first president to throw a baseball from the pitcher's mound. I read that somewhere.
Well, yeah, the older ones, the older presidents used to throw it from the stands.
They would throw it from the stands, right. Yeah.
I was at the game when his son, newly elected president, threw out the first ball at the Nats game. I think it was the first game at their new ballpark, and he was roundly booed, and it was hard for him to throw the ball because he was wearing this bulletproof vest under his Nash jacket that they gave him. It was very hard to throw a baseball 60 feet 6 inches when you're wearing armor. He did his best. Yeah. But I don't think he ever showed up again. That tradition, that wonderful tradition died. Not
after Jack Kennedy, I think. That was the last one, wasn't it?
Well, others have shown up, but not
they did it.
Year.
Yeah, Kennedy and Roosevelt, Eisenhower, Truman, and I guess Nixon, Johnson, they all threw out from the presidential box. But then later they all went and started to do that tradition, which
but Washington didn't have a team after 71.
Right. So the tradition was it was opening day. That was what the tradition was. And most of the presidents up to the war, up to World War II, were there to throw out the first pitch.
Yeah, well, Washington always got opening day in the American League.
Yeah,
It's like Cincinnati in the National League.
Yeah, they were a day early, right? Washington was a day early, and Cincinnati was a day early because they honored Cincinnati as the
in Japan again.
Professional team, and then Washington because of the president, right?
That's right.
They're opening in Japan again because Ichiro was going to play there.
That you repeat a story, George, that you've told before, and it is absolutely priceless about John F. Kennedy, George Case III.
Well, that story very quickly was that, I had worked out with the ball club. And
opening day, am I correct?
Yeah, it was. It was opening day, Griffith Stadium. I'd worked out with the club. I went in, got showered. I'm sitting in the dugout with my suit on and, next to the presidential box, ready to enjoy the ceremonial first toss. And all of a sudden I'm surrounded by Secret Service and they demanded to know who I was and why was I sitting there. And I had to point my dad out. They had to go out. A Secret Service agent goes out to the first baseline, gets my father. My father's got to come in to identify me as being his son, and they let me sit there. Otherwise, I was probably going to wind up in jail.
Right. I wish they would have paid more attention to Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That was it.
Exactly.
Unless it wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald.
Right.
Let's not get into that.
That's a discussion for another day, Dave.
I'm just teasing.
For another month.
I saw excerpts from that Executive Action movie the other night. The movie Stone produced and directed.
It was Kevin Costner, I think, right? Who was playing.
There was a whole bunch of stars in it who were involved in the film as conspirators.
Right. Well, it's been 55 years. He's not coming back. I said, give it a rest.
Who's not coming back?
Kennedy.
No. Neither is Lee Harvey Oswald.
Neither is. In fact, a number of years ago, they opened up Zachary Taylor's grave to find out the actual cause of death, and he died of according to whatever the report was, he died of a busted belly. He overate and got sick from it, and that's what they found when they dug the grave up.
That was true.
Yeah, I mean, but who digs up 100? Unless there's a crime committed, who the hell is going to have to drag up a 150-year-old grave?
Storage for 75 years.
So Ted Williams, he had some beautiful children also.
Yeah,
he did. That's true too.
Yeah.
That was John Henry, and he and his
now
Claudia. They got into a big hassle about that because Claudia accused John Henry of forging Ted's name on the will about the cryogenics and all that kind of stuff. It was a very sad
also
footnote, and then John Henry himself died. So that's a sad thing when you talk about a Ted Williams, one of the greatest of all, and to think about whatever his remains are frozen out, and I think it's in Arizona.
Arizona somewhere, I think. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Amazing.
Crazy.
We've had a great show. This has
been fun.
Terrific. As I look at the clock, thank you guys again. Hot Stove League is something we're going to have to do on a regular basis. It'll get us through the winter. How about that?
Well, that's the purpose of it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
That's right.
Okay.
And I just want to say I'm amazed at all of your memories. And if you would, David, before we close, what's your son's first name?
Robert. Mm-hmm.
Robert. On behalf of everybody here, congratulations to him. I'm sure he became a journalist following after his dad.
Well, thank you.
It's a great honor, David. Congratulations.
It is. Congratulations.
And also, it was mentioned that it might have been Joe DiMaggio's kid was greeted with, "You're not as good as your dad," this, that, and the other thing. Another story that George brought us a long time ago was people's reaction when you were playing Little League ball with the name of George Case on your back, and what you had to go through, and how people could be so ignorant and so non-feeling and so cruel.
Ralph, I appreciate you saying that. I know our time is limited, but, it helped me in a way because, my dad told me after that, he said, don't listen to people. And I didn't. I mean, I had to live with that, and I was able to play, and I was pretty good. But, my dad was sort of really upset that day because he said, why would somebody want to try and compare you as an 11 or 12-year-old to myself as a Major League ball player? I mean, it's ridiculous. So, my dad told me, he said, just don't listen to them. Just live your own life. And if you never pick up a ball, I'll always love you anyhow. But I just happened to play and had some pretty good skill. And the fact is that we played the same sport in the same town. So it was good. But I appreciate you bringing that up, Ralph. Thank you.
Okay. I feel for you. And I know how even subconsciously that has to have worn on you. And you put it best. It was an opportunity to come into your own, and with your dad's counseling. So, nice.
No, thank you very much. Always enjoy these sessions, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Look forward to doing it next week.
These are the best.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
See you next week.
Okay. Same bad time, same bad channel. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Adios. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.